In a previous video, we sat down with John Manoogian and he began to detail the design process behind the 1997 Pontiac Grand Prix. Let's pick up the story with John, and if you haven't yet seen part 1, check out the link in the description as well as at the end of this video to be sure to do so. Here's John continuing on with his discussion on the 1997 Pontiac Grand Prix design process. And starting off by commenting on how he tried to eschew typical Pontiac ribs on this 1997 Grand Prix.
I was trying very hard not to do ribs. It's just...
Your heart wasn't in it, huh?
Well, it wasn't so much my heart wasn't in it. I just thought for a Learjet for the land, it wouldn't want and need ribs. So
it's like a golf ball. It helps with the airflow.
There you go. There you go. So these were all proposals of different front ends from what Oldsmobile had shown. And we were looking at, because we had a GT and an SE, we had to have two different front fascias. So the SE would be what I would call the base or entry-level car. The GT would have a much more aggressive, but totally unique front end than the SE.
You brought up an interesting point that's really not done anymore. I mean, this was from an era of cars where, think about, like you said, the SE versus the GT, or think of how many different versions of Camaro they had. The base, the Berlinetta.
Correct.
Or Type LT before that, and then the Z28.
Yes.
You almost took the same car and you tried to have it look really different, but they don't do that anymore.
And they were aimed at two different buyers as well. The SE buyer was sort of the entry-level, I want a Grand Prix buyer. But the GT buyer was someone very specifically interested in the most performance,
right,
the most overt statement of my performance. And so the GT kind of wanted to gravitate toward that. So some of these sketches were SEs, some of them were GTs. The four-door sedans were going to be the exact same as the coupes.
Look at that body side sculpture there.
Yeah, I was on a roll on that one. But again, the different front ends, we were looking for two totally different front end designs because you had an SE and a GT. So we wanted two unique front looks so that when the customer came into the showroom, they said, oh, here's one look, which is the SE. Here's the other look, which, is the GT. Totally different look.
I'm not surprised they don't do it anymore because it's pretty cost efficient. It's a fascia and a little different grille.
Yes, yes. So this would have been like an SE proposal where we had the traditional Pontiac twin port grilles, and then in an effort to do GTs, I might have some of those here later. So again, doing GTs and SEs at the same time, we would be trying different proposals for tail lamps, graphics, to pull the GT and the SE further apart. So that when the customer is spending the extra money for the GT, they're getting a totally unique look that everybody knows.
Interesting.
All the while that was going on, Oldsmobile and Buick were also doing their versions of the W car. So on my own, without Oldsmobile's help, I said, what if we were sharing the same door skin on the Pontiac and the Oldsmobile? What could the Oldsmobile look like as a coupe and as a sedan? And I just did these on my own. No one had asked me to do it. But I thought it would have been a solution for Oldsmobile to do the sedan and the coupe much like we were doing our car, but with a totally different look, still keeping the same door skin. So I tried that one, and then this was a situation where what we would do to an SE to make it into a GT, where you would have a piece of cladding, you'd have maybe a plastic fender and a plastic quarter to get more of a GT look out of an SE. And these sketches show what we would have done if we were to share panels with Chevrolets, where you had the Chevrolet Lumina upper and then the Pontiac upper. And note the backlight on that Pontiac. We had a double bubble for a while.
Oh, yeah.
We thought that was kind of a cool idea.
Was that inspired by the
Italians? the Italians had done that in the 50s, Zagato. But this would have been the Chevrolet and then the Pontiac, and they would have shared the same inner. The outer would have been the Lumina and of course the Pontiac. And then this also showed if we were sharing panels and or making a GT out of an SE, where you had the different panels versus GT and SE. So then in an effort to do some wild GTs.
Now look at the inspiration that
Yes,
you got here,
the
John.
Ferrari F40, of course, with a previous Grand Prix in the background there, just to say, hey, here, I'm still grounded here in reality. And some GT proposals that kind of walked away from what we were doing for the front end of the car. And it's interesting because the way the car wound up, the SE has a very, very sedate, just kind of a twin port grille, whereas the GT has a very aggressive, I think, look to it. And
oh, look at that rear end.
this was a GT where we would integrate a spoiler into the design and then maybe change the quarters. I still had that double bubble roof for a while. And then a much more aggressive lower door rocker molding for a GT along with these aggressive air extractor. It's all visual.
Just like the 63 Corvette, you know.
Yes.
All the...
Yes. And then I was also talking and thinking about doing, the previous generation had an STE, which was more of a luxury level rather than a performance level. And I was wondering, what could we do with a STE four-door to make it more of a luxury package versus a performance package? So that was what that was all about.
I think that was the one that had the McLaren 3.1 turbocharged engine and the 4-bucket seats in it or something.
And that had the hood, the shoe scrapers.
Shoe
yes.
scrapers,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So this was a SE coupe version. Again, this retained that gray upper molding around the D-line. D-line meaning the glass area. And again, being as prolific as I was, I did a lot of idea sketches with different taillight graphics. There's that double bubble roof again. The D-line ring in gray. Then here's a sedan version. Again, a very soft, clean. We wound up adding the ribs at the last minute. The car had pretty much been released. And we were going through a period in the corporation and in the design center where brand character was becoming a very, very important element to differentiate the divisions. So Pontiac was sort of given the assignment of, you guys are ribs. So when they came in and they looked at the Grand Prix that we had in the studio, they said, there's no ribs on this car. And I said, yeah, there aren't. And they said, well, there better be soon. So I said, okay, we'll do something. So we wound up.
We'll do something. I like that.
We'll go back and
and
what we did is we put them in the fascias. And if you look at the production car, there's two very subtle ribs in the fascia, front and rear.
So that was your half-hearted attempt at compliance.
Well, I wouldn't say half-hearted. I was all in.
You were all in. Okay.
They said enough. Ribs. I gave them ribs. They just didn't tell me how big to make them and how long to make them. So here's one, by the way, that didn't have ribs either, but it had a very industrial-looking body side molding. Again, an STE being the more European version versus the domestic GT version. And with sketches, it's always easy to play. It's just a matter of doing the sketch and looking at it for a while and deciding yourself, should I pursue this or not?
I just can't get over how many of these you churned out. Too.
Well, and this isn't all of them, but it's the ones I kept. And again, most of them were pretty consistent, except what I was trying to do with the different front end graphics and the rear end graphics, where we separated the tail lights with body color, the round backup lights and the round driving lamps became kind of a Pontiac thing
right,
also.
That did. I remember that, the round.
For a while, that was a Pontiac thing, yes. And again, maybe a STE, four-door sedan, European-looking proposal. And then the last one here was a very aggressive GT look.
Big double bubble roof again.
Unique fenders, quarters, to get that race car look, feel, smell, appearance, unique exhausts, very slim tail lights with a big fascia with these air extractor slots. We wanted to give the customer what they wanted.
I think this car is another really interesting one that it's aged very well. I mean, you think about this.
Those cars, to my opinion, they still look good on the road.
And these designs are from late 80s, early 90s.
Yes.
30 some plus years ago.
Yes, they still look good.
And what do you attribute that to? What makes something look good after all these years?
Boy, there's a 2-day, 10-week discussion.
Stay tuned.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. My own personal opinion, and that's just an opinion, we all have them. The more straightforward, the cleaner your design is, I believe the longer, the more legs it has for surviving and looking consistently good. The busier and the more complex, I don't think they last as long or wear as well. Now, some people will probably argue with me, but when I look at art and I look at the Rococo and the Baroque era versus some of the other eras, complexity has always had a difficult time being termed beautiful, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But the cleaner, the more straightforward your design, like the Bauhaus look, which the Germans embraced all in.
Or the 61 Continental.
Or the 61 Continental. I mean, we can go through history, the XKE Jag, the Porsches, blah, blah, blah. They all tend to be very clean, straightforward, no nonsense, nothing silly about their designs. And me, I mean, I could sit here and argue that probably the Grand Prix would have more legs in the beauty contest than the Grand Am might, because the Grand Am was so complex. It had a lot of ribs, a lot of things going on.
Very overt.
It was overt. It was in your face. Whereas the base Grand Prix was very clean, straightforward, land jet for the road. Nothing silly about it. And so I think those are the designs that tend to wear well over history. And if you look at the past 100 years of automotive design history, I think the ones that always sort of surfaced to the top, the Accords, the Duesenbergs, some of the V16 Cadillacs, they tended to be very clean, straightforward cars. Now, there were always the outliers, the ones that were kind of overt and in your face. But for the most part, the cars that have really consistently worn well over time tended, to my eye, to be the ones that were less complex, more straightforward in their designs. When you look at Pininfarina's designs for Ferrari over a period of 20, 30 years, for the most part, those cars were pretty straightforward. There was nothing, except for maybe the Testarossa that had all the cheese grater on the side. But those cars were all form, beauty. It's It's just the way our eye perceives things. And when you look at Apple design, they took that to the ultimate level.
Yeah, very simple.
Apple took that design philosophy and made it part of their corporate culture.
Interesting. Well, it's certainly, I mean, it sold well. Another home run. I think, it was another one of those great confluence of factors. Priced right, sub 20,000, not as expressive as the Grand Am, but an expressive car. Dramatic departure from the vehicle that it replaced, but a huge sales success, again, for Pontiac. I mean, between this and the Grand Am, you were responsible, and your team were responsible for like 400,000 of sales every year.
Well, and
quite a bit.
Something else that I sort of said before, but I'll say it again. There was a white space in the market that didn't really have a sedan that was high style to my eye. And so we created, I think I'm sure there were others as well, but I think we created a niche in the marketplace for what would become the sedan slash coupe, the coupe slash sedan, the four-door coupe, if you will.
Yes.
And a lot of people hate that moniker. It doesn't bother me because it's a four-door coupe. So what? I know coupe and four-door oxymorons, but nonetheless.
Let's let you slide on that one, John.
And history has proven that Mercedes picked up on it, and the Japanese picked up on it, and BMW picked up on it, and it became very, very successful. I mean, Pontiac fell by the wayside, but at least the idea of a four-door coupe had legs.
Well, it sure did. Well, thanks again, John, for sharing these great sketches.
Thanks for letting me do it.
And great fun, amazing. The program took forever, but the production version was a great-looking car. At least
it was a gestation that was way too long, way too long.
At least it worked out in the end. Well, if it had,
I was so proud of those cars, and the team did such a wonderful job. I mean, it's one of those programs, you have these every so often in your career, where everybody is pulling in the same direction. Everybody's vision was identical, and we all knew exactly it was the BHAG. It was the big hairy ass goal. We all had the same vision. When you get a car program that you have disparate elements pulling in different directions, you wind up with the proverbial camel, the horse that was designed by a committee. It just never quite right. This car in particular was one of those programs that everybody knew exactly what we had to do, and they were all on board. Manufacturing, finance, engineering, everybody.
Well,
so that's that.
It sure showed. Thanks for sharing those sketches with us, John. And
thank you.
Appreciate you coming on and discussing, as opposed to some of the more challenging times.
Yes.
Some of the better times, right?
They got their money's worth out of me. They got their money's worth.
Well, thanks again, John.
Thank you.